Alright, guys, what's up? What is up? Happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Month 2025. June. Alright, so I'm looking at this Adventist magazine. I'm still listening to the Internet Asifa video. Um, I'm looking at Adventist World Included, Adventist Journey. Someone in my family gets it in the mail. It says Adventist Journey, Inspiration, and Information for North America. So basically, it's talking about internet. The title of this article is Spreading an Evangelism Net by Michael W. Campbell. It says in the past, NAD embraced technology for mission as creative initiatives utilized computers and satellite evangelism. In the past, so I don't know what NAD is. I don't know why it's called NAD. Oh, there it is, North American Division. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there's parts that I'll probably read. It says, as Adventists today embrace Pentecost 2025, it is, what is it? Pentecost 2025? What is going on? Okay. Sorry. Wow. I didn't know that there was a Pentecost 2025. It is important to remember some cutting-edge innovations for Adventist outreach and evangelism that took place during the 1990s. Some 3 decades later, it may be difficult to fully appreciate just how new, and at times even startling, these efforts were. Such discussions began in 1993 when the North American Division, NAD, leadership participated in a series of satellite broadcasts with the newly formed Adventist Communication Network. A test program on July 3, 1993 engaged churches across North America as evangelist Mark Finley conducted a large broadcast from Russia where he at that moment was participating in evangelic meetings. After the fall of the Soviet Union, suddenly new opportunities were blossoming across the former communist government as people hungered to simply have a copy of the Bible. And I'll read like the first line of some of these paragraphs until I get to the point that I want to read more of. So the beginning of one paragraph says, as a follow-up to the broadcast, this time held at the Capitol Hill Seventh-day Adventist Church in Washington, D.C., speakers included then Church President Robert S. Falkenberg, local church pastor, who together emphasized the importance of religious liberty. At the 1993 NAD year-end meeting, there was a 3-day spiritual retreat marked by prayer, praise, worship, and evangelic planning. Division President Alfred McClure challenged leadership about what they needed to do so that they might experience church growth. He believed that some things needed to change in order for the church to become more effective in its outreach. This meant that they needed to catch up with the times. Leaders identified 7 key goals for the denomination in North America. a vibrant church experience for all church members. Local churches that are mission driven and active in meeting community needs, a doubling of the division's growth rate, a management structure at the conference union, and I want to read all of that. The program would be uplinked by satellite to all churches. McClure noted that 200 to 300 churches had already signed up to secure equipment, even though the unofficial announcement had not gone out. That's a lot of churches. It says the first one was held by Finley and McClure. I guess it was Net 95, Net 96, Acts 2000. On the It Is Written television, it says It Is Written television changes the face of satellite evangelism, up to 3 million viewers, and has this old picture of Mark Finley when he was pretty young looking, talking. I'm assuming it's being recorded. It's a picture that he was talking while being recorded, I guess, and broadcast online, for one of the first times that this method started to be used. Mark Finley is shown speaking during a satellite evangelism program in the late 1990s. Slide from It Is Written presentation, circa 2009. Can't they find whatever? Okay. I think it says on March 28th of 1994, the first of a series of training initiatives was broadcast by satellite. And this next heading is called, how long is this? Let me see. Whoa, there's these pictures of computers. So let me see. Propelled forward by computers, the internet, and ads. As they prepared for a series, as Adventists embraced technology for outreach, another creative initiative centered on a computer program called Internet. This appeared to be a promising area for ministry. Oh my goodness. I don't know when I first heard about the internet. Because I remember when I was about 16 was the first time somebody had asked me for my email. I don't think I even had an email account set up. And my dad, I think my dad set up email accounts for me and my brother. And someone kept asking me if I had an email, and then my dad eventually set us up one. I didn't have email at all. And then I eventually gave it to the person who had asked me, but I'd only really given it to like a few people, like. And I remember the first email that I had, my dad made it. So, yeah. But I don't really know. He was probably reading our emails too. But let me see. CompuServe at the time could be accessed through local telephone numbers by 95% of the population in North America. As plans matured for the Net 95 evangelism series, McClure was on the forefront of organizing a number of training events from the second half of 1994 through early 1995. I'm skipping a lot, but I don't know, I just thought this was kind of interesting, because, I've been interested in things surrounding topics of internet and well-being. Um, okay, so it says evangelism was the critical ingredient necessary for church growth. Church leaders learned that it was possible to share one's faith with others through technology. And high technology, high touch ministry. Reports describe 66,000 people across 676 locations in North America on the opening night of Net 95. It was later reported that 5,000 baptisms resulted. High technology makes it possible to have more high-touch ministry, wrote McClure. With a satellite evangelist, thousands of pastors can focus on personal work with families and individuals. The meetings were later followed up with a special broadcast program titled Welcome to the Family, which aired on April 15. It says one of the first advertisements for Net 98 sent in the early days of email via CompuServe. So it has the welcome email. Whoa. The user interface of this email. Oh, it's on Netscape. I recognize the logo. Oh shoot, I haven't seen Netscape in whatever happened to them. So Michael Campbell is Director of Archives, Statistics, and Research for the North American Division. That's pretty cool. But that's kind of weird. So basically, this church, so is that a church position? So this article is written by Michael W. Campbell, and it says Michael W. Campbell is Director of Archives, Statistics, and Research for the North American Division, or for NAD. And you can go to www.nadadventist.org. I think that's where this magazine can be found, maybe, or maybe just that article. Let me see if it says it on other pages. No, it doesn't say it on other pages. Other pages say AdventistWorld.org. But this specific article says NAD. What page was I just on? I lost my place. Oh, there we go. www.nadadventist.org. That's kind of interesting though. So basically, this North American division for the Adventist denomination has archives. But basically, yeah, they have statistical research. Statistics and Research. Director of Archives, Statistics and Research. The thing that makes that interesting to me is basically the churches are tracking metrics. Basically, that's what that says. They're tracking information to see, I guess, church growth. I'm guessing church growth, demographics, because church is a business, right? And it seems like a lot of the early stuff with computers was used with statistics in mind, with marketing and statistics in mind, even if it wasn't specifically the way we market now, which is pretty fascinating to think. I don't know how I feel about it. Like, I get it. Like, I feel like part of me wants to be like, oh, they shouldn't focus on that, but it's like, in this country, at least, it's going to be hard to have a business. And church gets political. And it would be hard to have a business. I mean, you're the pastor, you're the face, you're the main leader of a congregation, of a building that is staffed usually by a bunch of volunteers, but also has some people who are paid. And we get yeah, like basically there are people who are paid who who do research basically, but I guess at the church in general, at each individual church, they're probably tracking information, which is interesting to think. Because I mean, as a business, like, they need to know if they should be able to keep their doors open, or if they need funding, and pastors get paid a certain amount, and there's tithes and donations of money that goes into these systems that circles back to these conferences and things, and the money gets put where it gets put, however it gets put. I'm pretty sure there's ways to find information about the economics of it all, and the tax related things. But I do think that all that, when we talk about the money, I do think that's why the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church have so much say. I don't really know much about Catholicism per se, but I know they have a big hand in the government, and so does, I think, the Mormon Church does too. But their members are kind of, there's more pressure on them to pay tithe. So yeah, there's more pressure, I think, to pay tithes. The other day I was looking it up. I was reading, what is it that what are the questions that a bishop asks? Let me see if I can find it again. What are the questions that that a bishop asks a Mormon member to consider them for a temple recommend? And in that list I did see something about, like, tithing. I just don't know the exact wording. So it says, there's this article that says church updates, temple recommend, interview questions, and I mean, does it have the questions? I don't know, I might have to come back. Okay, here's the questions. Let's see. Where is it? I'm looking through the questions. Number 10. Are you a full tithe payer? And it says, for new members seeking a limited use, recommend. Are you willing to obey the commandment to pay tithing? That's interesting. That is interesting. I didn't know that they talked about tithing as a commandment to pay tithing. Um, um, I'm looking that up a little bit. Where do they? I'm I'm skipping. I'm trying to skip the AI. The AI explanation. I just want to read an article. It says, I'm reading from churchofjesuschrist.org. It says it was also taught and followed by the people of the ancient Americas, as recorded in the Book of Mormon, Nephi, 3 Nephi 24, verses 8 through 12. And then they have other from the Torah. They have Genesis 14:20, about Abraham offered tithes, and then Numbers 18 verses 21 to 28. Tithing was a law for the children of Israel, and it was also taught and followed by people of the ancient Americas. So that is interesting. Because I know most churches tithe, but I don't know if I've ever actually heard somebody state that the tithing is a part of the commandments. Like, I know in Judaism, I know in Islam, they give to charity. I don't know if it's like a specific 10% tithing or what, if it's a percentage, but usually people say, do you tithe faithfully? And they quote from Malachi, and Jesus saying, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And it's kind of like, if the money belongs, I guess that was not tithing, that was taxes. But was it give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God's? Is that what the quote is in the New Testament? But basically, if somebody says that, basically the money is being given, out of your income. But because I guess it's like, if we pay taxes too, and those are separate things. I guess if you tithe and donate, you technically get, you can write it off. But yeah, like, it is kind of an interesting subject with tithing. That it's a commandment. Like, I've never heard Christians label it as a commandment. They talk about the Ten Commandments, and most churches maybe don't talk about the Ten Commandments, or the ones that do don't talk about the other commandments, or the ones that do talk about any other commandments don't talk about all of the other commandments. They just talk about some of the ones that fit the specific traditions. Like, I don't think the Adventist church would ever say it's a commandment. They would say the stuff around, like, eating pork is a commandment, but the stuff around tithing, I mean, they teach to tithe. You're taught to tithe. In the baptism lessons, I'm pretty sure there's something about tithing. Sabbath school lessons speak about it. They talk about it in church every now and then. There'll be like maybe a series that touches on it. And when they have the offering call, at least when I would go to church, especially when I was younger, they would talk about the church budget, and that information would be visible in the bulletin. I don't know if every church is that way, but the church I grew up in had a bulletin that had the church budget kind of breakdown, and it would say like what percentages or how much, money they needed for certain things, like for the building or for this or that, or like which ministries or whatever. And every so often, I think most churches did this like once a month, like this mission talk kind of thing, where I think all the churches got like a video to play that had like something about the mission report or the mission something. I don't remember. It was something about the mission, like money that goes towards the missionaries. But our church didn't usually reveal that during the service. They usually had one of the adult Sabbath school classes that met in a certain area. One of those classes used to have that. But yeah, I don't know. And they're all kind of like, I think they had a class that was like in the sanctuary area, but most of the classes were in like their own like private rooms. But I think there were like maybe 2 classes that met because there weren't like enough spare rooms, so they met like on either side of the sanctuary. But they weren't talking about anything intense, and one of those I think had access to the projector and would show the mission report once a month or something. And every so often they would say, "Oh, this one's really important," so they'd actually show it like during church or something. But yeah, yeah, but um, but this sorry for clearing my throat so much and clearing it into the microphone. Um, I really like, I don't know, I'm kind of just in the mood to read all this kind of stuff this morning, but I kind of like these temple recommend questions. I think they're pretty interesting. So, I don't know, but yeah, that's kind of interesting. This article that I started with reading is pretty interesting. And it's interesting to think about, churches taking statistical information and wanting to grow their services and things like that. Like, it's kind of like an interesting thing to think about because it is business, you know. Do you think it should be that way? Do you think it should be business or not? Part of it, hearing about it, kind of rubs me the wrong way. I'm like, it doesn't need to be like some kind of main organization with some taxable thing and like, but I don't know. Like, I don't not believe in like pastors having a salary and getting paid. But I do feel like it would be cool if they had churches where that wasn't like a thing. Where it's like everybody, like I went to a church before that was like pretty voluntary, and they rented out a couple spaces. I think they moved to another location at a certain time. I just don't remember where the other place was, but I think they had moved. But yeah, I enjoyed reading that type of article. I like that kind of stuff. And I've been really trying to study more about the effects of the internet. Like I've talked about it before when I grew up, with the Sabbath situation. There was a time where people didn't go online on the Sabbath, and then I don't even know if that's a thing anymore so much, because people's lives now are so like intertwined on the internet. it's like they're going to be on their phones. Maybe they're not going to be on their computer. Maybe they're not going to watch television. Maybe they don't listen to the radio. But will they not look at their phone? You know? Because everything's on your phone. So, like, maybe you look at texts, you know, but you don't go on any apps that use the internet or play any of the video games or anything on there. And or if you do go online, it's religious material only, or certain types of material only. Because for the people I knew, when they were allowed to watch TV, it was like you could watch maybe like the Nature Channel, or you know, you could watch like Veggie Tales, or like, you know, movies and videos that were religious, but you were still like watching something on television, and the internet wasn't that popular. So I'm pretty sure there are people that are like, oh, well, if I'm on the internet, it's going to be like religious stuff, but it's still using technology. Like, they're still using the technology on the Sabbath, even if it's not being used for the specific day-to-day stuff. But I literally saw that shift from when it was possible for people to just be like, I just don't go on the internet because I don't go on anything. Like, we're not on the TV, we're not on the radio, we're not on anything. And then some people would have like specific tapes, like VHS or cassette tapes that they would buy, or CDs that they would buy and listen to when they were driving or listen to at home, but they weren't listening to anything broadcast or anything online or anything on television. But they were like pre-planning and pre-choosing what they were going to kind of engage with. But most of the time, I think people were incentivized to be at church, and there were events before, after church, and maybe like afternoon stuff. Because when there was community stuff to do, it's like, well, if I can't be at home doing my own thing anyways, I might as well do this community stuff, you know? I think it kind of forced people to be out in community with their loved ones. But yeah, interesting, very interesting. I kind of think that's cool, that they have research. I kind of want to look more into the other research, but I'm pretty sure this guy was there at the beginning, and he probably saw research change when considering the internet. I mean, that's why he wrote this article, but this article is based on their archival statistics. Basically, I guess I'll read the very end of it. It says it was determined that 1,910 churches had participated in the Net 96 series, this resulted in 171,182 people who attended the opening night, with 51,306 non-members in attendance, and 9,772 who were baptized. Church leaders learned through this initial foray into technology that it was possible to share one's faith with others through technology. They discovered that through computers and satellites, the Adventist message could be shared in new and creative ways. So why would they want to share that message? Well, churches, I think they want to share their messages because they think they're having the correct information, and they want other people to follow it. And also, there's, what it said that Jesus said, go and make disciples, and baptizing them, and the whole being fishers of men or fish for men, but I guess if you look at what Jesus was doing, he was around, interacting, having a presence, but he was with his disciples usually. I don't know what they were usually doing, but I guess at least on occasion he went to temple. I mean, he was a rabbi, so he was probably teaching a lot. I mean, it's a very studious culture. Even over 2,000 years ago, they were still very studious, and they had students, and there was a rabbi that would have students. That was a regular practice. And Sadducees, Pharisees, scribes, they were above the rabbis, but I guess he was allowed to be a rabbi and to teach until they wanted to kill him, pretty much. But he was allowed to do it, at least for quite some time. And there would be debating and arguing, but like I've talked about before, that's kind of how I understand. Like, there is part of that culture in Judaism of people having, they follow the commandments, they can back up what they do with the commandments or with different teachings, but the way you kind of prove yourself is, can you back up what you're doing with some kind of, prophetic quote from like scripture, or from something that Abraham did or what Moses did, as examples. So if somebody's saying you shouldn't do this, but you're like, well, it's written over here that I can do this, so I'm making a claim that I can do it, and you're saying no, and I'm saying yes, and that's not like out of the norm, from my understanding. With Jewish study, that's not out of the norm. And even today, I've watched Jewish services. There's a specific Jewish service online. I think it's through Central Synagogue, but there's one where they're not in the main synagogue, or a different. It's like a family one, and it's kind of more conversational, and people can tune in online, and they kind of talk about some of the scripture, some of the Torah portion, and oftentimes people are allowed to kind of go around and kind of like speak on one of the verses, and then they move on to the next verse, and people give their opinions about it. But I've never really seen like debates, arguments, fights. And that's kind of what I like about the Muslim group too, is that I just like hearing people talk about this stuff. And so it's interesting, but yeah, it's nice to hear people talk about it, but yeah, I don't really know. Like, I think that kind of thing is really, yeah, it's really interesting. Because, I don't know, the church wasn't, I don't know if the Jewish situation, like back in Jesus' time, was, I guess there was an issue with the financial side of things too, financial corruption, when Jesus was like turning over the tables of the money changers and said that they were turning the temple into a den of thieves or something like that. He must have seen something corrupt going on and said that, and I wonder, would that apply today? I don't really know. I guess it depends on the church and where the money's going and how it's being spent and why. Someone I knew complained about the church where I used to go. I hadn't been for a really long time, haven't really watched it for a really long time, and then someone I knew went and they mentioned, hey, this church is really big, and you know, the last time I went, they didn't really have this big screen, but it's like bigger than a big screen. It's like when I used to go, they had like a projector that would kind of have a remote that would pull it down. A lot of churches I know have some kind of screen with projectors or some kind of, something so you can like read the lyrics for the worship songs, and they have like monitors for the singers sometimes where they can see the lyrics as well, or there's a monitor in the back where they can like read the lyrics when they're singing. And then there's someone with the PowerPoint who's like changing the lyrics. But usually they usually go through it that way, and I think I don't know, like it's just interesting to have that kind of like that kind of conversation where it's like, is it okay for a church to have spent some of the money on a gigantic gigantic digital screen wall? Pretty much, it's like the whole wall for the most part is now a screen. I don't know if they screen games like the Super Bowl and stuff, but they probably use it for media purposes, of course. But this is also Los Angeles, it's not out of the norm for people to be into entertainment. The church is out here, I know the church in Hollywood, is very, there's a lot of actors, people into film, but that also trickles down into other areas of LA. I'm pretty sure there are, because I went to another church that was heavy into like graphics and media and song, like worship team music, and the musicians were very well trained musicians, and that is pretty common out here. Even with the smaller churches, you'll have people who are very, very talented people. And churches kind of tend to be like that overall. Like how many singers do you know, or groups, especially with like the rap world, the hip hop world, the R&B world, like blues, jazz types of people. A lot of them grew up playing in church or with church, because where else are you going to be able to learn music for free? Are you going to have access to people maybe letting you borrow instruments, and be able to play and sing and practice at least once a week, if not more, multiple times a week? You have choir practice, you have all kinds of practices. But it's kind of like, even if you have sports, you're going to practice with your team, so it helps to have practice. But it was it was important for some of them, to have practice, and people just practice, and they get good at stuff. But a lot of musicians grew up that way, playing in church, singing in church. Maybe the talent was already there, maybe the church helped them have that talent, and then if you throw on top of that like a culture that supports the arts and entertainment and media, and there's a lot of activity surrounding that, A lot of creatives move to this city. You just have access to so much creativity and sports and things like that, and the weather's decent. So just a combination of things where you're able to do that. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. I haven't, I haven't finished. Of course, I haven't finished learning about all the internet related topics. But it is interesting that there is. I would assume that one reason why people in charge at churches want more people there. I mean, the altruistic reason would be, if you have lifestyle advice and lifestyle experience to offer, to where you know that you've tried things and you follow this certain path based on how you believe about the world, and it's working for you and it helped you with so many things in your life, of course you want to share that with people. So that part makes sense. And there's the more egotistical parts of people feeling like my religion's right or better than the others, and so I have to tell everybody to save them, because without me helping them to learn this information thoroughly, they won't be able to not go to hell. Some people believe that. Some people believe some people believe in the hell related stuff. Some people believe in the I don't know what else. Like some people, some of the churches, it probably is a money thing. They want the money to buy cool stuff. So of course, if you have more people who are tithing and paying and offering more money, your church is going to have more. I don't really know in the Adventist church if it exists that like certain pastors are like more wealthy than others. Like I don't know if they all get the same pay rate, or maybe it's based on where they live, or maybe it's based on their experience. But I do think traditionally every 5 years they move on, and it's to maybe keep it so that some of the issues you see with churches where a pastor stays really long, it can be good if they stay long, and it can be hard if they stay long. It kind of just depends, but sometimes a fresher outlook definitely changes things up. Sometimes that's good for the congregation, other times it's not, or just uprooting a family, that might not be good either, especially if it's a family with kids and they bought a house and all this other stuff. So I remember when they had to vote if the pastor of our church was going to get to stay or not, and there were some people that were so mad that he didn't have to move, because they're like, this is the tradition of this church, like, you've been here long enough, you need to leave. And there were a lot of people who voted that they wanted him to leave, and I think it was, I don't know if it was out of like hatred, maybe it was, I don't really know. I never heard anybody say they didn't like him so they would want him to leave. I never heard anybody say that. I only really heard people talking about the tradition. But it is pretty common that pastors are asked to move to another church. And maybe some of their congregation would follow them, maybe not. But there's also, some churches need a lot of tender care. There might be some specific people that might get pretty attached, or if the pastor makes a pretty big impact, maybe at a certain time or with certain people, when there's something tragic going on, or they just leave a good impression, of course people are going to want that person to stay. So it could be kind of heartbreaking if the person has to leave, if they are really someone that people like a lot. But I don't know, maybe not. But I don't know. Like I think uh, it's it's I don't know. It's pretty. It's I don't know. I'll probably just end this episode. But basically, like I can see different angles on it. Like if I'm just trying to be like, if I'm in more of a judgmental mood about it, and just like it's easy to see the negative, but also there can be a positive to it as well. Like money is a helpful thing. Somebody was telling me about their job, uh, kind of the process of certain things with their job, and we're kind of talking about the city, how many businesses we've noticed have shut down, the 99-cent store, Big Lots. There have been a ton of businesses that have shut down, and stores and companies and branches that have shut down, and there's like a lot of places for lease, and then there's like the real estate out this way is pretty good, so they do eventually get the spaces do like I've never seen somewhere stay vacant for like a very long time. Like the only places I know that are vacant, they use it for like a pumpkin patch or like a Christmas tree lot. Like I think that's the only place I can think of in my neighborhood that just doesn't usually have any other thing there. But I think it is owned, and I think they do use it for those reasons. But there's no actual house there, and there never has been any buildings actually there. But all the other buildings, whenever I see one get torn down or even a plaza get torn down, they build it right back up, and then something else goes in its place. We don't tend to have a lot in this area of LA. There's not a lot of like vacant, boarded up places or anything like that. Like they eventually get taken. Like I've seen places go out of business or whatever, and there are some shops for lease. But there aren't really that many. There really aren't that many. There's only one place that I just started seeing construction happening on, but there's only one place by one of the libraries that's been closed for like years. It's a Korean market, and it was actually a really good Korean market, so I don't even know why it didn't stay, but something must have happened. But yeah, just I think that's the only thing I can think of is that lot where the Korean market is, or one of them. I mean, we have multiple Korean markets, but yeah. We were talking about that and how different jobs are, not doing so well, or laying people off, or cutting out different things to save due to the economy, so they can stay open as long as they can. And I was wondering, I was like, why don't businesses, ask for donations, and just see what happens, see if they're able to get the donations to stay open. Because people donate, people like to donate, even if they're not religious, they like to donate. There's something about it that's like, people enjoy it. Like willingly giving your money to something that you believe in and that you value. I mean people are usually willing to give. I would say if they can, they will. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. I wonder if that gets taken advantage of by some churches. I mean, there's always going to be corruption. I don't want to just like pick on churches and religions. It's like, you know, human greed. I think sometimes it's not even. Some people, I really don't think they're even aware of it. Like, I'm pretty sure if I've been greedy, I wasn't aware of it. And I would like to think when people have been greedy towards me, that they didn't really know, you know, like when people were like expecting me to pick them up and take them home, and they didn't know that I didn't really have the money for that, you know, but also I wasn't like asking them for money. Um, but I was pretty broke, and, you know, but I don't know. I wasn't really, yeah, like, I like this article. I'd want to look into it more. This nadadventist.org might be interesting. Thanks for listening.